Hello all and welcome to Meanwhile in the West, my weekly series where I read through letters to the editor in my local newspaper, The West Australian, and I criticise the stupid things that stupid people write in. First letter. Jumping the queue, 9th of July 2014. Australia has an orderly process of introducing people who wish to come to this country. If the people smuggling trade is not stopped now, we may as well send a manly ferry to go out and pick up the queue jumpers and declare the borders open again. The hope of an easy life in Australia with a check every fortnight is no criteria for just rocking up from the safe haven of Sri Lanka. John Bandy Scarborough. Yes, so we're back to asylum seekers. Firstly, Australia does not have an orderly process. Well, yes, Australia has an orderly process for people migrating to Australia. It also has a separate intake for asylum seekers, but there is no queue for asylum seekers. There are a number of allocated places here with visas, which is far less than the demand, and there is no queue that one gets in. If you wait in a UN refugee camp, say, you could be waiting there for decades. And in fact, literally millions of people around the world are awaiting settlement in refugee camps. And we are now reaching the point where I think we're onto our second generation of people born into refugee camps. And so the orderly process is failing humanity, full stop. Secondly, whatever the Australian government says about having a queue or a sort of a process for accepting people, it is in Australian law and international law that people who arrive in Australia, whether it be by boat or plane, etc., who then claim asylum, are completely within their rights to do so. And so there's nothing about us having an orderly process that precludes people from coming here by boat. There literally isn't anything. Secondly, none of these attempts are actually going to stop the people smuggling trade, such as it is, and I've yet to see that there is even much of a trade. It's something that's been alleged, and it's been a nice sleight of hand so that people can feel less racist when they are arguing against asylum seekers by saying that they're not against asylum seekers, they're against the people smugglers. I've yet to see it actually be established that there is this group of people who are callously making a living off sending people, asylum seekers, in boats to Australia. I suspect that is a far overblown thing. And also, one, people don't come here for our Centrelink. The Sri Lankans that you are referencing come here because they did not come from a safe haven of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is now, and has been for a while, an authoritarian regime that tortures its own citizens, which disappears and murders dissidents. Once upon a time it was, mainly the Tamils who were being persecuted. Now even the sort of other ethnic groups within Sri Lanka are at risk of persecution if they happen to speak out against the government. And that is the driving force pushing people from Sri Lanka to seek asylum here. And in fact, what we've seen recently is the Australian government has even turned back a boat of Sri Lankan asylum seekers who were attempting to make it to New Zealand. They weren't even trying to come here, and we sent them back anyway. And the Australian government likes the idea of the Sri Lankan government being a stable democracy, and we sent them some patrol boats so that they could better police their their waters. That is, that they could intercept asylum seekers before they even get here, because we'd rather they catch their dissidents so that they can lock them up and torture them, so that we don't have to have anything to do with it. And the idea that somehow a Centrelink check is what these people are looking for is just crap. It's just complete crap. Next letter. Confusing strategy, 9th of July 2014. I don't understand why there is a seniors card. How can someone who hasn't worked to the current retirement age of 65 be entitled to the same rebate as those that did? PJ Arathun, Beachborough. So this is in reference to the West Australian state government have something called a seniors card. Essentially, if you're over the age of 65, and I think you have to be retired, you are eligible for the card. So there's no real means testing on it at all. And when you get the card, that entitles you to a variety of discounts on things like public transport, etc. And as the letter writer points out, you don't even have to work to 65. you just have to be over the age of 65 to entitled to it. And the reason why this is because essentially, when they brought it in, it seemed easier to administer if it was just given out to people based on age. This way, they don't have to do any means testing. They don't have to have. There's essentially no administrative overhead. They just check that your age is as you say it is, on your official documentation, and then give you the card. The amount of discounts are fairly small on many things, but in the current climate of budget responsibility and austerity, it's now looking like they're going to cut back on it, because it did offer a rebate on things like power bills, and car insurance, the compulsory car insurance, that is, licensing. And so that kind of stuff was looking like it's only I think it's only sort of tens of millions a year, but in the current budget sort of situation, that's looking untenable. And maybe with a bit of administrative costs, it could be better targeted. So there you go, Mr. Arathun. Like many of these things, means testing, although it seems like a great idea, does have administrative overhead. And if you're talking relatively small amounts of money, sometimes it's easier just to give it out. School for Crybabies, 10th of July 2014. I read in amazement that it is now below or substantially below standard to refer to a young patient as a sukilala, doctor rebuked 5th of the 7th. My dictionary indicates a suk as someone timid, bashful, or a hand-reared calf. I fail to see how medical authorities have time to concern themselves with such a serious misdemeanour. Surely an offence less than a felony, a sukilala indeed. What has the world come to? N. Garben, Mount Claremont. So you undermine your point in your actual letter. To refer to somebody as a sukilala, like you did, recognises that the dictionary definition is not the one that's being used. I'm not sure if this is universal, but certainly within our culture, to refer to somebody as a suk or a sukilala is to dismiss them as being overly emotional, to be overly timid, and to be afraid or to cry for no good reason. And the doctor in this case was a paediatrician, and he's referring to a patient as a sukilala, a patient that is a child, a young child in this case, wasn't his only offence. He also recommended that parents beat one of their children, and in fact I think the words were beat to within an inch of their life. It's that kind of stuff that in which the context of calling a baby or a very young child a sukilala occurred. And so essentially we had a paediatrician who was telling parents that they should disregard the fact that their child was crying and dismiss it as simply being a sukilala, and was telling, I think, other parents to beat their child to within an inch of their life. This was a serious misdemeanour for a paediatrician. We know that some parents, many parents in particular, don't need any encouragement from their paediatrician to assault their children. And for a paediatrician to encourage it is grossly below standard, I would have thought. And so, yeah, to pick on the fact that he used the sukilala and take it out of its context and use the dictionary definition is disingenuous, especially when all of the information I have is from the same article that you supposedly read. Ensuring Justice for Victims of Crime, 15th of July 2014. I thought the principle was care for the victim and punish the perpetrator. It appears the opposite in the case of the drunk driver, Melissa Waters, who caused the death of Nate Dunbar. Soft time, 12th of the 7th. She is now in a pre-release holiday camp, Baronia Pre-Release Centre, where she can see her children. Not so for Stacey, Justin and Kai, because they will only see Nate in their hearts and minds. When will the justice system realise that the victims of crime are the ones you look after? Trevor Abbott Hammersley. Well, here's the thing, Trevor. The job of the justice system is not to care for victims. In essence, the job of the justice system is to devise an appropriate punishment for the offender, and that's it. So it has never been the case where certainly not within the last several hundred years, have we expected our justice systems to really do anything for the victim other than to give them some sense that justice has been done. That's the only expectation. Now, what we have here is we have a case, Melissa Waters was drunk and she was driving, and as a result, I think she crashed into a house or... Anyway, she caused the death of a toddler called Nate Dunbar. As part of our justice system here, if you're the victim of crime. There is an agency called the Victim Notification Register, and their job is to alert you to pertinent activities by the offender. So in this case, the family of the toddler who'd been killed are kept up to date about various important things happening with the offender, Melissa Waters. One of which was she got transferred from a relatively high security jail to a low security jail. And because she was transferred to a low security jail, which meant that potentially in minimum security here, you are allowed out of the jail on various outings. And so there was always the potential that through random chance, they could have bumped into their offender. The victims could have. And so as part of that is I think at the point where she was transferred to a minimum security, they were notified so they would know. That's one of the things that happens within our justice system here. This made it to the front page of the newspaper because essentially she'd spent 10 weeks, I think, in the high security prison of her sentence. And people saw this as a gross injustice. Now, as was pointed out, the reason she was transferred to a minimum security is because firstly she pled guilty to her offence and she showed a hell of a lot of genuine remorse. She was absolutely appalled by her own behaviour, and none of her drink driving was done with the intention of killing this child. Now that's not to excuse it, but many people have driven in their lifetime. Almost everybody I know has done it. And if any of those people, and so for everybody I know have done it, and none of us have killed a toddler, but any one of us could have, and been in the same situation she was. So she spent 10 weeks in a high security jail. Then through the normal processes, she was assessed as suitable for going to a low security jail. And the whole purpose of this Baronia pre-release centre is the idea that this woman is going to get out of jail, and she's going to get out of jail relatively soon. And there's actually some good evidence. The reason why the WA criminal justice system built this pre-release centre is because the evidence showed that one of the key factors in preventing women from re-offending was allowing them to maintain a good, tight relationship with their family. This was one of the key things. So women, particularly mothers, who lost their connection to their children were at a far higher rate of risk of reoffending. So we built a pre-release centre where, yes, they can see their children. In fact, the children can come and stay overnight with them, some of the young children. This is a very important part of their rehabilitation and preventing them from reoffending. And this woman in particular was a fairly good candidate for this, to prevent her from reoffending. Essentially, the argument goes that by doing this, the WA government criminal justice system, the government, is investing in preventing her from killing any further children. And so all of this outrage that people had about her going to this holiday camp, in essence what they're saying is that we should lock her up for longer, and if she goes out and kills anybody else, we don't want to take responsibility for that. Well, unfortunately, the government has. The government has to take responsibility for this. As soon as you choose to lock somebody up, what you do with them, how you lock them up, and what you make them do with their time, where you lock them up, is the responsibility of the government. And when we know that locking people up in high security prisons, women in particular, in high security prisons for long parts of their sentence, one, is more expensive than is necessary, and two, causes them to commit further crime, that would be morally irresponsible. And so yes, it isn't a good look. But do you know what? Punishing her even more will do nothing to bring back this dead child. I haven't heard any outrage from the family, and even if there was, victims don't necessarily have a right to see justice done the way they think it should be done. There are countries in the world where that kind of system occurs, and usually this is Middle Eastern type countries, or possibly through to the subcontinental countries, and we rightfully deplore the kinds of things that happen in those countries as an appeasement to the victims. The paying of things like blood money, we as a civilized society see as deplorable, and I would say that this is exactly the same case. This woman is being punished in a way that the courts have seen to be legitimate, taking into account the entirety of their circumstances. And any call for blood that's all it is. It's just the mob baying for blood. Last letter. Nobody's Business, 15th of July 2014. It has been revealed that Ian Thorpe is gay. The most important thing about Ian Thorpe is what a fine young man he is and what a champion sportsman he is. News of his sexuality is as news to most of us as is the news that the earth is not flat. But is it any business of anyone else? Best wishes, Ian, A. Butler, Pinjarra. And there was a whole pile of these. So Ian Thorpe, for those of you who don't know, won a whole bunch of gold medals for Australia in swimming. I think most of it was in the 2000 Olympics and around in those times. So probably about 10 years ago where he was at his peak. And was a champion swimmer, and there's always been these rumours that he is gay, and just within the last week he's come out as being gay after having strenuously denied it for a long time. And there was a big interview about it with Michael Parkinson. And a lot of people wrote into the paper to say, well, what's the big deal? We all love you, Ian. You're a great sports person, so what do we care what your sexuality is? And I felt like that was really missing the point. Ian Thorpe probably has, I wouldn't be surprised if he had experienced homophobia in his time, and certainly now that he's come out. But in the grand scheme of things, he's probably done better than many other closeted gay people. He's got the admiration of an entire nation, and the fact that he won a whole pile of gold medals for a country that is obsessed with sport means that most people are not going to care that he's gay. And him coming out as gay, the most important thing is the people who most need this are all of those other closeted gay people who are bullied. The 15-year-old boys who are still stuck in high school, for whom being gay is something that they are taunted about on a daily basis, need people like Ian Thorpe to come out. Those are the people for whom this is the big news, is that this helps to normalise their sexuality, as it were, that it helps to push further the idea to the rest of us as a society that it's perfectly normal and not something that people should be bullied over. I've thought similarly with the treatment of our ex-Prime Minister, Julia Gillard. So she was our first female Prime Minister, and she got a lot of stick for a lot of things. And there was some misogynistic, anti-female comments that were made about her. Now, I don't think Julia Gillard in particular was particularly hurt by those. Certainly her career was hardly harmed by her being a woman, given that she rose through the ranks to become the Prime Minister of Australia. Obviously her career and probably her personal life was not particularly damaged by misogynistic comments. The people who were most hurt, though, by the misogyny that was thrown at Julia Gillard are all the girls, the young girls in particular, who were looking up to her as a, potential role model. All those girls who thought, I would like to be Prime Minister, who were off-put at the way that she was treated. Those are the people who suffered the most. Now, you might say, well, Tony Abbott's copped just as much, and that is possibly true. He doesn't cop a lot for being a man, but yeah, he's copped a lot. But the thing is, as a young boy, you have a lot of prime ministers you can look up to who are male, who you can take as your as a role model. If you don't like Abbott, then you could go for Hawke. If you don't like Hawke, you could look up to Keating or Howard. For girls in this country, there's only been one female prime minister. There's only been, and only recently, and she got a lot of stick for that. And so, same with the Ian Thorpe thing, the whatever homophobia he suffered, one of the reasons why we need people to come out and to stand up and not be treated poorly is because these are important role models for people who are struggling with these issues. So yeah, in some ways, so what? It's no business of ours, and what do we care? Well, it's no business of ours what sexuality in Thorpe is, except for a whole bunch of people, 15-year-old boys who are in high school getting bullied because they're gay. It kind of is their business. Not that they can demand what his sexuality is, but it kind of is big news to them, and hopefully it goes some way to helping, destigmatise homosexuality. Anyway, that's it for this week. Hope you're all doing well, and I'll see you next time when we find out what's happening in the West. See you later.